Russia uses Ukrainian military base as a launchpad for deeper invasion. On July 27, 2025, the Russian military launched a powerful attack from a base they had captured inside Ukraine years earlier with 50 tanks, 30 armored vehicles, and 70 suicide drones. They advanced in a high-tech blitzkrieg designed to penetrate Ukrainian defenses. But Russia had no idea that their actions were being watched and waited for. The Russian tanks entered a vast minefield 3 square miles in size filled with more than 4,200 anti-tank mines hidden beneath fields and dirt roads. However, Ukraine's plan was almost foiled when one of its trucks nearly ran into its own mines. Once it did, it would have set off a series of explosions, destroying the minefield. Will Ukraine's plan succeed? And what weapons will they use to counter Russia's powerful firepower? Join me in the fight. At exactly 6:40 a.m. on July 27, 2025, satellite imagery revealed a massive Russian armored column rolling out from former Ukrainian bases in the Donetsk region. Territory occupied since early 2023. This wasn't a reconnaissance patrol. It was an invasion force. 50 Russian T-90 tanks, 30 armored troop carriers, and over 700 infantry soldiers thundered westward in perfect formation. Leading the spearhead were 70 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, not for surveillance, but for destruction. These were suicide drones programmed to seek out Ukrainian positions and detonate on impact, creating corridors of fire for the armor behind them. Each drone carried high-explosive warheads capable of shredding concrete bunkers. But what made the assault more chilling was the strategy. If a UAV encountered resistance or radar interference, it self-detonated immediately, treating its own loss as acceptable. For the first time since the initial 2022 invasion, Russia deployed a fully integrated mechanized assault, combining armor, infantry, and loitering munitions. Ukrainian generals watching radar screens knew this wasn't just another skirmish. It was a calculated attempt to break their front line before fall. Western analysts were stunned. The estimated cost of this single offensive pushed over $350 million in vehicles, munitions, and drone systems. The Kremlin was making a bold and expensive gamble, and if successful, it could shatter months of Ukrainian defensive gains. But Ukraine wasn't sleeping. Deep beneath the surface, something far more devastating had already been prepared. Before we know what it is, tell me where in the world you are watching from. Now, let's see what Russia is about to face. As Russian armor roared toward what they believed was an exposed Ukrainian flank, they had no idea they were driving straight into a death trap meticulously crafted over weeks. Under orders from General Mykola Shevchenko, Ukraine's 93rd Mechanized Brigade had transformed a 3-square-mile stretch of farmland into a mine-infested hell zone. Over 4,200 anti-tank mines disguised beneath fresh soil and crops were laid in staggered formations to delay, confuse, and destroy. The trap wasn't just explosive. It was psychological. Narrow passageways were left open intentionally, baiting Russian drivers to funnel into safe lanes, only for them to trigger buried sensor-activated mines that detonated under high pressure. Within 4 minutes, 17 Russian tanks were blown into twisted metal. Their turrets launched 50 feet into the air. What made this trap so effective wasn't just its engineering. It was the timing. Ukrainian UAVs monitored every movement from above, feeding real-time data to ground commanders. At the perfect moment, they activated electronic triggers to maximize damage. But not everything went as planned. A Ukrainian field unit misread coordinates and nearly sent one of their own resupply trucks into the minefield. The driver slammed on the brakes just 6 feet from the edge. If not for an urgent radio warning from a drone operator above, it could have triggered a chain reaction that would have compromised the entire trap. It was a terrifying reminder. Even the best-laid defenses can collapse from within. But that day, Ukraine held the line, and Russia, charging blindly into open ground, was now bleeding metal, fuel, and men into a field that had just rewritten the rules of modern land warfare. Like, subscribe, and join me as we witness the Russian weapon of destruction. The smoke was still rising from the Russian wreckage in the minefield when the second wave of Ukraine's defense came thundering in. This time, not from underground, but across the horizon. At 7:15 a.m., Ukraine's 12th Armored Assault Battalion launched a 3-pronged counterattack from concealed positions west of the blast zone. 32 T-84 Oplot tanks supported by 10 self-propelled artillery units and mobile anti-aircraft platforms moved with stunning coordination. The ground trembled. Ukrainian tank crews had waited for this moment, fueled by months of attrition and now backed by precise battlefield intelligence. As the surviving Russian tanks scrambled to reorient their turrets and retreat from the minefield, the Ukrainian armor came in at full speed, 45 m/h, guns hot. Within the first 90 seconds, 9 more Russian tanks were obliterated in direct hits, their crews never standing a chance. Above, the air erupted. Russian suicide drones, those that hadn't already self-detonated in the failed advance, began to dive on the incoming Ukrainian armor in a desperate attempt to salvage the mission. But this time, Ukraine was ready. Mounted on the flanks of each armored column were Shkval 6 rotary cannons, multi-arral anti-aircraft guns capable of firing 4,000 rounds per minute. Like buzz saws of death, they filled the sky with lead. Drone after drone exploded mid-air, some just 30 feet above tank turrets. The sound was deafening, a mix of screaming engines, thunderous guns, and exploding debris. In total, 47 of the remaining 53 Russian drones were shot down in under 4 minutes. The others veered off course or crashed into empty terrain, jammed by Ukrainian EU electronic warfare systems that flooded the airwaves with false GPS signals. Meanwhile, from a ridge 600 meters to the east, Ukrainian howitzers opened fire, targeting the edges of the Russian retreat. The blasts were so precise that they destroyed supply vehicles and wounded several Russian medics trying to retrieve the injured. A Ukrainian tank commander named Vavik K. the Wolf later described the moment. "They walked right into hell. We didn't need to chase them. We just lit the fuse." By 7:31 a.m., less than 20 minutes after Russia's spearhead entered the kill zone, the entire front line had flipped. From attackers, the Russian forces had become hunted prey. And Ukraine wasn't done. Buried among the wreckage, high-resolution drone footage confirmed the presence of a command vehicle transmitting encrypted orders to the remaining Russian infantry. It was the nerve center of the whole operation. What happened next would seal Russia's fate in this region and shake its chain of command to the core. As Russian tanks burned and their drone swarm disintegrated in the skies, the chaos on the ground gave way to something far more surgical. At 7:35 a.m., with the Russian spearhead crippled, 850 Ukrainian infantry troops who had been silently lying in wait began to move. These were no regular foot soldiers, split into 7 fire teams. They included elite sharpshooters, anti-armor specialists, and electronic warfare units. All had been concealed in pre-dug trenches, abandoned farmhouses, and dense tree lines bordering the kill zone. The operation had a code name, Operation Frost Hook. Its purpose was simple: strike once the enemy was disoriented and leave no chance for recovery. As the remaining Russian infantry dismounted from their damaged vehicles, seeking cover and trying to regroup, Ukraine's fire team sprang into action. Dozens of RPG-29 launchers fired in rapid succession, targeting command trucks and armored personnel carriers. One direct hit ignited a Russian ammo truck, sending a fireball 3 stories high and showering flaming shrapnel across a 100-yard radius. Simultaneously, snipers with thermal scopes picked off Russian squad leaders attempting to rally troops. In less than 6 minutes, over 110 Russian soldiers were killed or incapacitated. The rest began to scatter, some fleeing into woods, others dropping weapons and crawling for safety, but there was no escape. Ukraine's 3rd Airborne Scouts had flanked behind the Russian advance 2 hours earlier via underground drainage tunnels, cutting off any retreat route. When the panicked Russian troops ran, they ran directly into a wall of gunfire. Then came the moment no one expected. In a half-collapsed communication vehicle near the southern tree line, Ukrainian troops discovered a wounded man in full Russian field command gear surrounded by maps, satellite comms, and a torn insignia. A biometric scan confirmed it. Colonel Victor Seionovich, commander of the 42nd Armored Regiment of the Russian Western Military District, a key figure in Moscow's southern strategy. He had tried to escape under the guise of a wounded conscript, but a sharp-eyed sergeant noticed his pristine boots and officer's GPS wrist device, items no frontline grunt would carry. Within minutes, the colonel was restrained, patched up, and airlifted under guard. The capture was a gold mine. On him were encrypted data drives, combat orders for the next 72 hours, and detailed layouts of Russian fallback positions. Ukrainian intelligence described it as the single most valuable capture of the war since 2023. By 8:05 a.m., just 85 minutes after Russia's offensive began, the entire operation had collapsed. 42 Russian vehicles destroyed, over 200 soldiers killed or captured, and their commanding officer now in enemy hands. Ukraine had not only survived, they had humiliated a superior mechanized force using tactics that blended 20th-century grit with 21st-century precision. And the world was watching. By 8:10 a.m., what had started as Russia's most aggressive push in 6 months had turned into its worst single-day ground defeat since the early days of the war. The minefield that devoured their tanks, the drones that fell like flies, the ambush that routed their infantry, all culminated in a disaster that stunned even Ukraine's own generals. Satellite reconnaissance confirmed the aftermath. 42 armored vehicles destroyed, 14 disabled and abandoned, and over 230 Russian soldiers dead or captured, including one regimental commander. The entire spearhead of Russia's 42nd Armored Regiment crippled in under 90 minutes. Moscow went silent. No official statement, no televised speeches. But Western intelligence reported that multiple senior Russian officers were placed under investigation within hours. Rumors swirled that Colonel Victor Seionovich's capture had exposed serious flaws in Russia's southern campaign planning and even internal dissent among field officers. Ukraine, by contrast, did not celebrate with bluster. At the Mykolaiv military hospital, medics treated both Ukrainian and Russian wounded. One Ukrainian corporal who fought in the ambush was later photographed offering water to a captured Russian teenager, just 19 years old, visibly shaking, face burned from a nearby explosion. That photo went viral because for all the precision, strikes, thermal optics, and battlefield AI, this was still a war between people, sons, fathers, neighbors. And though the victory was clear, the cost of war always lingers. In Washington, retired U.S. General Marcus Holloway commented on the battle in a televised interview. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a case study in discipline, planning, and humanity. Ukraine didn't win because they had more weapons. They won because they had more wisdom. Indeed, that wisdom came from restraint. Ukraine could have leveled the battlefield with missile barges. Instead, they waited. They let Russia overextend, then struck with calculated precision, using terrain, timing, and local knowledge to inflict maximum damage with minimal loss. But the final lesson was not just military. It was moral. Colonel Seionovich during early interrogation reportedly said, "I never saw it coming. Your people fought like ghosts, not with rage, with purpose." It was that purpose, defending homeland, not conquering others, that powered Ukraine's resistance. It was the same spirit that once fueled American soldiers in Normandy, Bastonia, and Fallujah. In the end, Ukraine didn't just stop a Russian armored column. They reminded the world that bravery isn't blind charge. It's the courage to outthink your enemy, to outweigh him, and to show mercy when others expect revenge. The battlefield fell silent that evening, but the echoes of this engagement will be studied in military mice for decades. What unfolded on the morning of July 27, 2025 was more than a military ambush. It was a masterclass in modern warfare, resilience, and moral clarity. Ukraine, outnumbered and facing a technologically aggressive assault, did not retreat. Instead, they planned, waited, and struck with precision, turning Russia's most confident offensive into a historical catastrophe. In just 85 minutes, Ukraine neutralized a regiment's worth of Russian armor, eliminated hundreds of enemy troops, and captured a commanding officer holding the keys to Moscow's battlefield plans. The cost to Russia was staggering. Over $350 million in destroyed assets, critical intelligence lost, and their aura of dominance shattered. But perhaps the most powerful victory was unseen. The triumph of values over violence. While missiles roared and drones fell from the sky, Ukraine chose not vengeance, but strategy. They spared civilians, treated enemy wounded, and even showed compassion to frightened young conscripts. This war, brutal and relentless, is not fought by monsters. It is fought by human beings. Some misled, others defending home. And in this chapter, Ukraine reminded the world of a truth often forgotten. That strength is not just firepower, but the wisdom to wield it with restraint and the heart to recognize humanity in an enemy's eyes. As this battle fades into military textbooks and news reels, its deeper lesson must endure. In a world growing colder and more chaotic, Ukraine showed that discipline, dignity, and duty still matter. They didn't just win the day, they defended a principle. And perhaps that is the most important victory of all. If this story moved you,